Without further ado, Brian Peskin.
Thanks. Oh, delightful. Thanks. I really appreciate everybody taking the time and effort to come out. I'll try and turn on both sides so I can talk a little, and then I'll move to the side. Everybody hear me okay? So I'm an electrical engineer by training. The question is, how'd you get into the field of, medical science, medicine, and all? Well, the medical community let my wife down. She became type 1 diabetic, doing everything right, in her 30s, exercising her tail off, low fat, everything. She went to a clinic in California, came back, higher blood sugars. So it was like, Brian, you're a good science guy with the engineering. Can you look at health and tell me what the problem is? So after about 5 years at MD Anderson's Jesse Jones Library, I decided I had to publish because the medical science was on the left and the popular nutritional nonsense was on the right. And I'm a scientist. So you'd go to the health store, and this is what I did. I'd read a book by Atkins, no carbs. You read a book by Ornish, all carbs. Diametrically opposed. You go, who do I believe? Answer is nobody. I believe science. There's physics, there's biochemistry, there's physiology. There's about 300,000 medical textbooks at MD Anderson's hospital. It's one of the top 10 in the world. And I went back to 1850s for the Lancet, premier medical journal today. This was out of London, England. 1850s. I had my hands on it. So anybody that says we didn't know everything back then, it wasn't tracked back then, get into a medical library and learn something, because you're wrong. They knew exactly what cancer was in 1900. Things were categorized. We're getting highly, highly misled. So here's a few of the biggest mistakes, myths in medicine. Lowering cholesterol stops heart disease. Anybody here believe it? No. 1% at best. This is by pharmaceutical companies. Means NNT of 100. I treat 100 patients, 99 get a problem, 1 doesn't. That's an NNT of 100. You want a very low NNT. You want 1. How do I get an NNT of 1? Insulin. I shoot you with insulin, your blood sugar goes down. I give you a statin. NNT of 1, 2. Your cholesterol is going to go down. And I'm going to tell you why it was a good attempt, but it doesn't work. So we're going to talk about that. It's tied to the structure of cholesterol. Staying out of the sun. How many of you stay out of the sun, avoid it because you don't want to get skin cancer? That's where it's all, right? My cat looks for the most sun to sit in the spot every day, whether it's inside or outside. They have an innate intelligence. And if you look at the South American countries, they're all in the sun. The problem isn't the sun. You need the sun. You make vitamin D from the sun. So everybody has a vitamin D deficiency, right? Because we're all told to stay out of the sun, take sun blockers. So again, we're given the deficiency by the recommendations. Answer is to stay out of the sun is to have the right structure in the skin so your skin can take the sun. And this is all tied to PEOs. We'll talk about that. But it goes on and on. Here's how bad it was. Houston Chronicle last week. Anybody see this? Looking at preventing Alzheimer's with parasites. Anybody here see this?
Yes.
I had to look at it 3 times. Parasites. Number one, it's going to give you a problem if you eat a parasite. But to say something as bad as this shows complete lack of insight into what possibly is causing the disease. So I'm an engineer. We have cause-effect. We have a system. We have an output. We have an input. What's the input? What you eat. What's the system? You. What's the output? How sick you are, how fat you are, what your energy is. Real simple. So I guess very early on, the problem is in the input. Why? Because all diseases cross economic barriers, right? Doesn't matter socioeconomic barriers. Rich people get cancer, poor people get cancer, everybody gets heart disease. Everybody's getting cancer. By the way, the statistics are 53% of women, 70% of men. So on average, everybody's getting cancer. Well, it's in the genes. If it was genetic, the species would die. That's about the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And in the Hidden Story of Cancer, I have a whole chapter dispelling that. Top molecular biologists, even the guy that came up with the oncogene thing, Weinberg out of MIT, it's where I went to school, reversed it. Anybody here see that? It's not genetic? No. Said the number of genetic mutations that it would take to get cancer is above the number of mutations they ever see. And now they go, well, you get the thing and we think it's genetic, but there's 30 different mutations and we can't tell what's doing what. It's because it's not genetic. Turns out something tells the genes to turn on and off. It's not just what you're born with at all. So it goes on and on and on with the nonsense. So I want to tell you a little bit about, there's only 3 components of food: protein, carbohydrate, and fat. So I'll start with carbohydrate first, because we were told to live on a high carbohydrate diet, right? Well, the medical community, the nutritional community made Americans the fattest people in the world, and everybody is diabetic. Dr. Habib, a superb diabetic endocrinologist, all he does is diabetes, said, Brian, pre-1940, you know the number of diabetics, type 2? 0. Did not exist. So type 2 diabetes is a created disease, of course unknowingly, but we did it to ourselves, listening to wrong recommendations with no science. And what happens here? Well, publishing has become an end in itself. So I'm, at a university or I'm at a hospital and I've got 300 papers with my name on it. You've got 50. Well, I'm 6 times better because I have 300 with my name on it. This is the way it's looked at. My comment would be, you got 300 with your name on it, you should be embarrassed as heck. What have you accomplished with those 300? What's been eliminated? Is there a disease eliminated? Is there a new procedure in surgery? What'd you come up with, 300 paper? Well, number one, they do grad students or fellows. They just slop their name on it, so it's not their research, they're just tagging along. But nothing gets done. I stopped looking at the medical articles long ago because there were so many. I would look at the abstracts, about 600 a week. Out of the 600, 2 should have even been published, and the others, they just do it. It's become an end in itself. The physicians I have a lot of empathy for because they are so overloaded with patients, they don't even want to see any more of this. It's very hard to get a physician to spend 2 extra seconds looking at anything in the nutritional field because they're exhausted. We keep getting sicker and sicker. So, carbohydrate, there's 2 types. The biggest one is called a glycemic carbohydrate, and that means you eat it, it hits the blood sugar in the blood. Makes your blood glucose go up, okay? That's the diabetes. You go, well, is there any other type? And the answer is yeah. Get a complex carb like celery, that will do nothing. There's also carbohydrates, and there's different systems that use sugar that don't hit the bloodstream. GLUT4 is the big one, and that's tied to insulin, but there's about 15 other ones that don't hit the bloodstream. How much sugar is in the bloodstream? When I saw this, I fell off of my chair. We're told to have a 60% carbohydrate diet, right? It means 2,000 calories a day. 60% is 1,200. Divide it by 20 calories. It's a teaspoon of sugar. That's 60 teaspoons of sugar a day is what we're told to eat. Or we have been. Not in the paleo ones, but in the carbohydrate diet of the 80s, the 90s. We were told to eat 60 teaspoons of sugar a day. So the question is, how many teaspoons of sugar is in your bloodstream? Well, they don't give you teaspoons of sugar. They give you millimoles per deciliter. The answer is 5. So I'm an engineer. I want to see teaspoons of sugar. I know what a teaspoon is. I don't know what a millimole for blah. So I spent 10 minutes, and it was 7/10 of a teaspoon. Go, how the heck can there be 7/10 of a teaspoon? Less than 1 teaspoon in 5 quarts of blood. Must be off by a factor of 100. Maybe it's 70. And give it to somebody else. Goes, yeah, it's 7/10 of a teaspoon. So here's the thing. It is. We have less than 1 teaspoon of sugar in the whole bloodstream. And the average American is eating 60 to 100 a day. Okay, is that a problem? Maybe it just goes away. It does go away into fat. That's called the insulin response. So to maintain that 1 teaspoon, and that's 70 to 90 milligrams per deciliter, you prick your finger. My wife's type 1 diabetic, I told you, so I have a test lab right there. I can check all kinds of stuff. So she checks it. That's the 70 to 90 milligrams. That's less than a teaspoon of sugar. And that's normal. Now, if you're diabetic, it can be all over the place and go to 1,000. It's not often, but it can go to 1,000. You may die. You're certainly going to be in the hospital and go into a coma. Less than a teaspoon of sugar. So all those extra 59 teaspoons go right to body fat by the insulin response. Insulin is defined, textbook of medical physiology, the #1 medical textbook, physiology in North America. Every physician has learned from it. Fat storage hormone. Well, what more do I need to know? Insulin's a fat storage hormone, and it's only stimulated in the bloodstream by carbohydrates. Okay? So that 59 out of the 60 teaspoons of carbohydrate sugar you ate goes right to fat. This is where the big exercise thing came from. Remember exercise. Where do you think that came from? Because in the 40s and 50s, no one exercised. Women were told, don't exercise. You ever see those old movies? The guys were thin, the women were thin. No exercise in there. There were no gyms. You didn't need to. So my comment is, I don't want to be living in the gym. How do I do that? I better know what I'm eating and what puts on weight and what doesn't. But that's how bad we are. So textbook of medical physiology has this. You have to eat carbohydrates to get that insulin response and pack on the sugar. There's a complex carb. They're better, right? You've heard all of this. You know how much time differential there is to go to the blood sugar as a simple carb? It's 10 minutes. I looked at the curves, and they're in the PEO solution, and they're in the 24-hour diet. This came right from the company themselves. 10 minutes. So my big joke is you get just as fat 10 minutes faster. Does that sound like any big deal to you? Also, and this really shocked me, the resting blood sugar level was higher from the complex carb than the simple carb. So I'd rather have you eat the simple carb, get it the heck out of your system, and you're done with it. So this whole thing with, complex carbs and whole wheat pasta, you're better off with the white pasta. Now, you want organic stuff, is better. Forget the whole wheat being better for you. It's the same amount of carbs. Yeah, there's a tad more of bran in this and that. It's insignificant. You're wasting your time. Eat it for the taste. So carbohydrates make you fat. And if you look at how much carbs are in a can of Coke, could be 8 teaspoons of sugar. So here's a number, memorize it, 20. Every 20 calories, it's a teaspoon of sugar. So just take the calories of carbohydrate. A calorie means, by the way, how much energy I get from burning something. Nobody eats calories. So this is really stupid when people talk like this. That assumes you're a heat engine, and this is why the calorie theory is wrong. And by the way, the calorie theory was disproved in 1893 by Professor Fick, MD, medical physicist. We're not heat engines. We're not burning stuff in a fireplace. We're eating for structure, right? And that's why the whole calorie thing went away. We're not just burning food for energy. You have muscle that's made from protein. You have tissue that's made from protein and fat. It's not getting burned up. So all the nutritionists, half of the medical field is in the calorie stuff, calories eaten, burned up, how fat you get. Utterly wrong. This was shown, you had all the books in the 1940, 1950, martinis and whipped cream, calories don't count. Atkins just stole it from other people. He didn't have anything original. South Beach Diet was nothing original. None of this stuff's anything original. This has been around, but the medical science says the same thing. And that's what I like. I don't go doing things with studies unless I know what the study's going to show. A study should confirm established medical science, not be counter to it. So when I see half these things saying the study showed this, I go right off the bat, it can't. That's like saying I drop a ball off the roof of this building and it's going to go to the sun. It can't if it's a ball. I'm not saying it's in helium or something that's like gas. But you take a ball, you take a brick, it's going to hit the ground every time. And you don't have to keep doing experiments. It's like with fish oil. There's supposedly 15,000 fish oil experiments. Why? Why do you need so many studies? With gravity, you have 2. I do one, the ball falls. You do one to check it. Yeah, it still fell a week later. We're done. It's a reason you do it, because there's a chance the study's wrong. And it's typically every 5 out of 100 studies show it works when it doesn't. That's the price you pay for probability theory. So that's why you do it. So if you do 1,500 times 5% is what? 750. So out of the 15,000 studies, I have 750 that failed, but they look like they succeeded. I just point to them, the heck with the others, and that's what they do. That's how you're all conned. Everybody's conned. The medical profession, the individual, everybody. And I can't blame physicians because they're typically not trained in statistics. You know, it's not their job. And what they do is they make it really pathetic because they take the topic or the summary and they lie a lot of the time. The article does not say what the summary does or what the textbook, not the textbook, but the newspaper or the magazine states, because they want to fluff it up and make it sensational. You always see this stuff in the paper, right, about the next big discovery. How many of them pan out? Next to none. Oh, this is going to revolutionize this, and then nothing, 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 nothing. And that's why, because there was nothing ever to begin with. So carbohydrates really are a major problem. When you look at a cell, there's no carbohydrate in the cell. Okay, it's half fat, half protein. You have 100 trillion cells. A little bit of carbohydrate in there. Yes, carbohydrate does give you energy. It is not the brain's preferred energy source. I hear that all the time. Absolutely wrong. Your own body fat, and fat is the brain's energy source. By all this carbohydrate dosing, you're forcing the brain to run on carbohydrate when it doesn't want to. And that's a major problem. So fat is your number one energy source, not carbohydrate. So carbohydrates typically aren't real swift. Protein. A couple things with protein. Well, if it's not fat or carbohydrate, it's protein. So that's meat, proteins in cheese. There's fat too, of course. Typically, there's a certain amount of fat, protein, and carbohydrate in almost anything. But the majority, for example, in a steak is going to be protein and fat. A couple things with protein. You can't eat too much. You're going to kill your kidneys. That's absolute garbage. You even have stage 4 kidney specialists. A lot of them don't cut back the protein. Your kidneys have infinite capability to dump hydrogen ions. That's what you're talking about here. Unlimited. You're not going to overdose on protein. Now, should you be eating a pile of steaks and protein? Well, I used to eat 1.5 pounds a day. I just wanted to see if I'd lose weight. So I did this for months. Yeah, you lose weight. I didn't like knocking off that number of animals, though. So I didn't really like it. But I still like steaks. But I eat less of them now. Other thing with protein is 60 to 70% of the protein is burned up in its own digestion. Takes a lot of energy to break apart the protein, okay? Takes almost no energy for carbohydrate. If you want to decrease your metabolism, carbohydrate does it. There's nothing, because there's no, quote, nutrition in there. There's nothing in it. Plus, they typically, more you eat, the hungrier you get, right? They can't eat just one. Give you a cookie. You're going to stop, you're going to eat the whole bag. That's what my wife did. That's what most people do. One chip? No, I'm eating the whole bag. It's called positive feedback. That's not what you want. You want negative feedback, and that's the insulin response. So you get a big spike in the insulin, then you get a low. Because you've eaten so much of it, nature never intended us to do that, so it overshoots. And then it goes down. That's when you want more, to get your blood sugar higher. So you're always ping-ponging. This whole thing with balancing blood sugar is insane. Your body does it. Doesn't need you worrying about how to do it, just like pH balancing in the blood. 735 to 745. Nature does not need you taking high pH water, for example, to change something. It does it. But back to the protein. 60 to 70% of the protein is burned up in its own digestion because it takes so much energy. Body is smart. It goes, I'm not going to exhaust the person. I'm going to use the energy in the food. The other thing is there's a pile of water in protein. A steak that's cooked, for example, is 58% molecular water. Nobody knows that. It's never even mentioned. You need almost no extra water outside of the food. If you're thirsty, you're out in the sun, drink the water. But do not ever, ever, ever force feed yourself water. Cats drink almost no water. They get all the water out of the food. And we should too. But who came up with this? 8 glasses of 8 ounces a day. The water companies, of course. They've had athletes that have actually died because they force-fed them water. I'll give you a gallon of water, I'll kill you. You drink it when you're thirsty. They completely overlook the water content of food. Vegetables loaded with it. For example, lettuce, 90% water. You don't need a glass of water with dinner. I mean, it's ridiculous. See all these poor people exercising, lugging water. It never ends. And if you don't really know the answer in advance, you're not going to know this. I mean, this is all I do. I specialize in the parent essential oils, which I'll talk to in a minute. And because that's at the center of the circle, every deduction is right. Because you start here, everything else follows. And, you know, over the years, there's so many physicians that have found my work and go, Brian, you're the first one that answers this. You're the first one that answers this. This never worked, but I didn't know why. Your science does. And then I wrote the 24-hour diet because the doctors would give us some science, you know, that we can tell our patients. And then the last book I did, PEO Solution, with Dr. Rowan. He's a raw foods vegan. So I'm a carnivore. So typically you hate each other's guts, right? This has never happened in modern history that I know of. We have a vegetarian and a carnivore writing anything together. But the overlap is the PEOs. Now, he can get them from the raw foods. They're not adulterated. So, all the protein you eat, 60 to 70% is burned up. 50 to 60% of that's water. You're not left with much. And even if you were, it doesn't matter. You're not overdosing. Now, what does protein do? Compared to carbohydrates, which do basically nothing except give you a burst of sugar. So it'll give you some energy if you're running. That's why an athlete can eat it. And that doesn't matter. Brown organic rice, organic oatmeal, organic bagels. I don't care what the heck it is. It's still a carb. The only thing that's different with that is if it's complex like celery, that doesn't count. Because cellulose is not food. Okay, it's sawdust. And by the way, anybody eating fiber is going to irritate your colon. Insoluble fiber is cellulose, it's sawdust. This was published in 1999 Lancet, 2000 New England Journal of Medicine. Women eating the most fiber got the most colon cancer. Lo and behold, in 2017, that's in the toilet. And fiber. See, medicine and nutrition just go in a merry-go-round circle. The same stuff they did 20 years ago, they're back to today. We don't know what to eat. High carbs or high fat and protein. Of course you do if you looked at science. But they go round and round in a circle, right back. Everything else advances. So it gets very frustrating. So in my books, you'll see a merry-go-round. 20 years later, the same nonsense. And then we don't know. So you can put a man on the moon, but I can't tell you what the heck to eat. Do you know how stupid that is? How embarrassing that is? Anybody should be embarrassed. I don't know what you should eat. Or it doesn't matter. People lose the same weight eating high carbs or steaks. Well, that doesn't make any sense either because everything's not equal. So back to the protein. Half of every cell membrane protein. Have 100 trillion cells. Half of your hormones, non-sexual ones, protein. Antibodies, protein. They're blood buffers to keep that pH in your blood, 735, 744. Protein. Goes on and on and on and on. Protein is critical. Your muscle is protein. Your bone is made of amino acids, protein. That's the structure of the bone. Anybody just taking minerals isn't going to give you stronger bones. It does give you a more dense bone-ish structure because I have a bone and I'm just dumping something on the outside, so it pulls up in a density scan, and you have a denser bone, but it's not the bone matrix. So it's the wrong thing. That's not osteoporosis, lack of calcium. Osteoporosis is lack of the bone matrix, and the oils and protein make a stronger bone. Everybody see that picture that was sent around? Okay, this was a patient that fell on her face. This was in Massachusetts in the winter, slipped off a curve, 86 years old, face forward, boom on the pavement. And you could read what the ENT, it's now a plastic surgeon, said about that. The recuperation was remarkable. Physicians use the word remarkable, meaning something I don't see too often. It's an extremely rare case. She didn't break a bone, break her nose, fracture cheekbones, break a tooth. Shocking. None of that. All the inflammation under her eyes in about 10 days. Remarkable resolution. And then it took about 60 days to be almost completely healed. It's typically 4 to 5 months. This is an 86-year-old patient. Pre-treated, take any oils. I've seen a lot of this. People fall. They don't fracture anything taking these oils and eating still normal amount of protein. But it's mainly the oils. You want a bone that's flexible. You don't want a hard bone that you've dumped a lot of calcium on top of. It's going to fracture. It's just like I take a glass bottle, drop it on the ground, it's going to break. That's not what you want in a bone. course you want some integrity and strength, but you want it flexible so it doesn't crack. So protein is very, very important. How do you get it? Doesn't matter too much. Can you cook it? Yeah. Problem with steaks, by the way, is not the protein, is not the red meat, it's what they give to the animal. It's the steroids and hormones, period. That's why in the 1900s, there was no cancer and heart disease. Pre-1920, there was no heart disease. The person with the EKG from Germany was told to go back home. We don't have heart disease here. Don't need you. Look at it now. By the way, a third, first heart attacks, you're dead, right? It's about a third. You don't get any symptoms, you don't get anything, you're just dead. It's 1/3. Can't afford the risk. So protein is really required, but the biggest problem, now the thing with denaturing, minimizing the additives is the important thing with cooking it. So meat, I like more towards well done. So I did a test at the lab. I took a hunk of steak, just gave it and said, what's the estrogen content? Say it was 100. And then I made it medium well to well done. It was down to about 90 or about 5. So 95% of the estrogen was denatured. It means it doesn't work. So if you cook the meat pretty well, you don't even need to go organic or free range. But I like doing that anyway because I don't want to risk it. The number one problem today is in the adulteration of the oils. Everybody says everything in moderation. It's all this, it's that, and it's not everything. It's one main thing by a factor of 1,000-fold. The adulterated oils. And why are they adulterating the oils? To get long shelf life. Because you can't have foods smelling like fish that's gone bad, right? If you walk by the fish department in the supermarket, it smells. Well, that's the oils going rancid. Now, you can't have food doing that, and I understand that. So what do? I have to do something to stop that. And there's many ways to do it. Typically process it, it makes it where it doesn't work. This is why margarine is called a plastic. If you give a plastics engineer margarine, hydrogenated oil, they'll say, yeah, it's the same structure. Okay, big deal. It is a big deal. Remember the 100 trillion cells you got? Half protein, half fat. Well, out of the half fat, about half of it saturated fat, and monounsaturated fat. 1/4 to 1/3 of the content of the fats in every one of those 100 trillion cells are PEOs. And that stands for parent essential oil. Okay, I coined that term because I got so sick of people saying EFAs being fish oil. It's not fish oil. There's parents, which is parent omega-6, parent omega-3. There's an extra double bond. You don't need to know about that. All you need to know is there's 2 separate types. Body can't make them. Got to get them from food. Omega-6 is in the vast majority. Very few foods have a lot of omega-3. Now, grass does. Some of the plants will. But by and large, the nuts, the seeds, most of the food is heavy in the omega-6 because we need it. But we're overdosed on omega-6. Everybody says that, right? You all hear that? Overdose, overdose, overdose. When you figure it out, you need 11 to 1. We're not overdosed. We're overdosed on the adulterated parent omega-6. Because when you figure out the tissue ratios, it's about 11 to 1. So I need 11 times more omega-6 than omega-3. And I get tired of looking at these books. Yeah, primitive man had 1 to 1. There's no way on earth he had 1 to 1. That's beyond stupid. Even the cow, if you look at its tissue that's living on a lot of grass with a lot of omega-3, body's burning it up. Their tissue is heavily in favor of parent omega-6. So they just say anything. In the nutritional field, you just say anything you want, and you get followers, and they believe you. Well, my comment is, these people ought to be shot. You know, they're dealing with people's health and lives, and get used to asking, what is the metabolic pathway? When you hear somebody tell you something, sir, and we'll be talking about that later, what is the metabolic pathway? How's this happen? And you better get an answer instead of just some stupid look. What? Don't listen to them. Not open to opinion. You don't want my opinion on anything. You want what is the science on whatever your question is. Opinion is for art, politics, anything that's not going to kill you with wrong results. So the oils are heavily processed to shut down oxygen transfer. That is what oxidation is. That's what rust is. So oxidized oil. Anybody has age spots, the brown dots on their hand? That's oxidized oils. You got the same thing inside you, by the way. You don't want that. That is proof you're eating this junk. It's not happening by the sun or something. Well, it could be the sun, but because you don't have these in your skin, you're getting that. You don't want it. It's called lipofuscin. That's the technical term. Big thing is your skin is all parent omega-6. There's no parent omega-3 in there. So you hear all this stuff like fish oil makes my skin smoother. First question is, what's the metabolic pathway? How? Answer is, it can't. Doesn't do it. Can't make your skin smoother. There's none in there. But it is all parent omega-6. So if you're getting adulterated omega-6, women's today's skin is typically horrible. I mean, everywhere I go, I get a 20-year-old girl. Let me see how soft your skin is. And I beat them. I said, but I got a secret, you know. And it's incredible. Fingernails are all parent omega-6. So people taking the PEOs, fingernails are like rock. The hill valleys go in the fingernails too. They're smooth. Guess what's all parent omega-6? The intima, inside of the artery. One little cellular layer thick. It's all parent omega-6. Now guess what? If you have adulterated lining of the artery, it's going to crack. It's like the straw that cracks. That's why cholesterol comes in, tries to heal it, and you get a clog. It's called an occlusion. Not made to have that. What happens if you have fully functional parent omega-6? Slippery. It's like Teflon. Nothing's going to touch it. So to stop a heart attack, if any of you care, and you should because that's the #1 killer of everybody, only two ways if you really get a heart attack. Artery can't expand. It's like a straw, so it cracks. Or you got a clog. You got a clog, what happens? You get a high blood pressure. You know, take the spigot of your faucet and turn it and there's no flow. Stop those two things, real easy. Well, guess what? The parent omega-6 side does it. They actually make the inside of the artery wall so it's slick. And the derivatives from the parent omega-6, so there's parents and there's these things called derivatives. Derivatives typically don't make up the cell itself. Okay, they're not structurally in there. They may be in the cell membrane, but they're not making the tissue like your skin is made up of the parent omega-6. The derivatives are eicosanoids, so they work very fast hormones. They don't hit the bloodstream, but it keeps the platelets from sticking together. In this case, they're in the blood. It's got prostacyclin, and you have PGE1. That's the body's #1 anti-inflammatory. Prostacyclin makes it where the platelets don't stick together, and they don't stick to an arterial wall. Well, if they're not sticking, how do you get a clog? Oh, but if you cut it, you know, if I cut my skin, I'll get blood, and I'll get a throb, or thrombosis. That's the scab, right? Well, it should dissolve away. And with the PGE1, it will dissolve away. And this is known, 1981. This was looked at in Germany. So this is all in PEO solution. I give you the science. I give you exactly where it is. What gets me is I'm very good at connecting dots. Seems today nobody connects dots. Remember all these medical journal articles? Nothing's connected. You did 300 articles? You did 500. You're extra brilliant. What's connected on it? What's solved? Nothing. That's the problem. They just print and print and print, and nothing is ever resolved. Doesn't lead anywhere. It's an end in itself. Tragedy. It's a real tragedy. So if you don't want to get a heart attack, unadulterated parent omega-6. Remember I told you the oxygen transfer? That's why you get the parent omega-6 in the cell membrane. It allows oxygen to go in easier, and it disassociates. So the membrane itself can disassociate and take its oxygen in the membrane and shove it into the mitochondria where you need it. That's how the energy's done. It's a whole lot about this. Cancer has one cause, by the way. Not hundreds like you're always told, which is brilliant. If I don't know anything, what do I say? There's hundreds of causes. Do you ever expect me to figure out how to solve it? I just told you there's hundreds of causes. Nobody can do that. It's inhuman. It's impossible. There's hundreds of causes. I can't. And there's one. This was known too, lack of cellular oxygen. Otto Warburg, MD, PhD, most brilliant physiologist of the 20th century. Nobel Prize winner. Brilliant. He discovered that you decrease by 35% of cellular oxygen, even intermittently. So I can have full oxygen, decreased by 35. Full oxygen, decreased by 35. You're getting cancer. This was verified in 1953 and 1955 in America with American scientists. They did brilliant studies. They looked at the heart. Whenever it was deprived of oxygen, cancer. Now, you don't kill it. You deprive it of oxygen forever, you're dead. So cancer is a survival mechanism. Everybody's going, oh, it's an inside invader. It's not genetic anything. That's been completely gone, right? Inflammation can cause cancer, but it's lack of cellular oxygen. So this was absolutely proven, but they didn't figure out how do I get cellular oxygen. That was PEOs. So Campbell had it in 1976, but he didn't really know what he had. And I didn't know his work until published Hidden Story of Cancer at second printing, and then we found it. But I figured out it had to be in the cell membrane. And even the biochemists I worked with, PhD, said, I don't see it. I said, I don't care if you see it or not. It has to be. So this is where the theory is so good. It's the only time I went out on a limb and said it had to be true. And it was. You increase the cellular oxygen, you don't get cancer. That simple. Now, there's tons of secondary causes. Asbestos, what's it do? Irritates. Inflammation is the #1 reason for cancer. Sucks the oxygen. How do you solve everything? Oxygen. It's like it puts out the fire. Oxygen. Stops everything. That's what you do. So if you're restricting the oxygen by having all the oils in the supermarket, those oils are all processed. They're not getting the oxygen transfer. Now, it works great to keep the food okay. It doesn't smell, but it kills us. Now, remember, the threshold is 35%, and it turns out it's a percentage. So if you're eating 20% screwed up fat and 80% okay, 20% of the structure is screwed up. This is known too. It's a big question. What's the percentage that gets, if I eat junk and eat good stuff, it's exactly what you're eating. It goes in pretty much proportionately. So the more good stuff I have, the more junk I can eat. So it's not, I can't have fast food, I can't have it. No, it's just, you better have something compensating. And you got a 35%. So you got a good margin to begin with. Average person gets cancer. I told you, it's 53% of men, 70% of women. It's not the numbers they give you with the 40. Everybody. They don't want to tell you the real numbers. And they're not going down. Only reason anything is better is they catch it earlier. You have better survival rate? Nope. All this personalized medicine, forget it. You get cancer, you got a major problem. You don't want to get it. And PEOs, because of their oxygenation, #1 thing on the list. Absolutely #1. So cancer and heart disease are tied together. Oxygen. The deal with cholesterol, and why it was a good first attempt, if I lower LDL cholesterol, okay, how do the PEOs get transported in the bloodstream? I don't know, I never thought about it. Just go in there and swim around. No. Because you have water and you have fat. They don't go around. So you have a structure called a lipoprotein. So the fat and the water have to be combined. So you have a cholesterol structure and it's tied to triglycerides. There's a lot of stuff in there. Bottom line is the PEOs are magnetized to the cholesterol. So the cholesterol is the transporter of the PEOs. Okay? Of any of the parent omega-6 and omega-3 and even the derivatives. So if I lower LDL-C, what have I done? I've lowered the adulterated fat. Okay? And that's good. I've gotten rid of some of the poison, because I told you it's poisonous, doesn't transfer oxygen. Cancer and heart disease are in your future. So I lower it. That's good. Problem is you also lowered the good stuff. So like I said, it was a good first attempt, and that's why it doesn't work. If you ask most cardiologists if statins worked, are your waiting rooms now half empty? The answer is no, they're overflowing as heck. Unless you talk to an academic at a college. One tried to say that. Yeah, since statins, we don't see any heart disease patients now. I don't know what universe you're in, buddy, but everywhere. Every cardiologist I ever see, it's flowing. It's just a tragedy. So cholesterol is transporting the PEOs, and that's how it's tied together. So if I have a screwed up structure of that, I have a screwed up structure of my cell membrane. And that brings them into the cell membrane. So oxygen is tied to heart disease and cancer. So biggest bang for the buck, and I'm about maximum efficiency. There is something called SEAC, which is excellent. It's a Canadian Indian herbal thing that's very anti-cancer too, because it makes the whole digestive system very slippery. Because there's slippery elm bark in it, which is excellent. There's burdock root, sheep sorrel. It's a phenomenal blood purifier. Big problem today is eating a lot of junk with additives, right? If you're not organic, the additives you eat will kill you, because if they stop fungus and mold and all kinds of things from growing, well, they're not doing us any good. So to minimize the negative junk, you need a detoxifier. So SEAC is the best one, and I like adding cat's claw to it because it makes the upper respiratory phenomenal too. So you could look that up. It's in the books, but it's called SEAC's been around for a long time. A lot of history on it, probably 100 years. But the oils are the number one thing. So anything that has fat, you want to make sure it's natural or organic. Eggs, chicken or cheese, bacon, butter, cream, organic. That's where you spend the money on organic. And of course the oils. But any of the foods that are high fat, because all the residues are in the fat of the animal. So the reason all women are getting excessive breast cancer and everything, and they're overloaded on estrogen, isn't because estrogen is turning on your body. That's insane too. We're getting it exogenous. You're eating it. All the residues in the meats, they're not organic and naturally raised, you're getting them. Big problem with antibiotic residue too. We're getting it from the animal. It's not because people are taking it and abusing it. It's in the animal fat that we're getting. Not supposed to be there, but it is. So you really need a detoxifier to help take care of that. Another big thing is minerals. Minerals are called coenzymes. They make, for example, the vitamins work up to 100 times faster in chemical reactions. There's about 8 essential ones. I personally don't care too much about the micro ones. There's 70 of this, and I care about the big ones. Especially the ones tied to oxygen transfer, like magnesium, like zinc. Another big thing is antioxidants. We're on the subject with minerals. Your body makes them just fine. If you want to take them, go ahead. You don't need to, as long as you get the minerals that make the antioxidants like SOD, superoxide dismutase. Phenomenal antioxidant. But your body makes this. Your body will do everything. If you think nature is going to leave having to do something to us, you're insane. We screw up everything we touch, from hydrogenated oils, you name it, we screw it up. Told you there's no heart disease, no cancer in 1900. Look at us now. Are we living that much better? Well, we got more convenience. You're sick. And look at the insurance premiums now with the health care. I don't know about you, but I've seen mine. The deductibles are so bad, unless you have a major problem, you're not using it. You cannot afford to get sick anymore. So 3 things are the biggest. You just look at the time here. Number 1 is the oils. If you're not getting these oils, again, body can't make them, you're gone. So you need the unadulterated oils. You need a brand formulation with more parent omega-6 and 3. Remember I told you body uses 11:1, so you need more omega-6 and 3. I like having some GLA in it because that's the immediate precursor of PGE1, which is the body's #1 anti-inflammatory. So anybody who has arthritic joints, pain, you need PGE1 made. Diabetics have impairments called the delta-6 desaturase enzyme. So I like making it easier on that with some GLA. So I like evening primrose oil is a very good source for that. A few other things you want, but those are the big things. Has to be organic. Has to be cold pressed. Can't have any chemicals in the seeds. We're trying to avoid all that. So that's a big thing. Minerals, there's 8 of those. You want them called truly chelated. If you don't chelate a mineral, there's no telling what the heck it binds to. So it's in there, but it separates and it binds to the wrong thing and doesn't work. If it's truly chelated, those are done by Albion Labs. They're covalent bonds. They don't stick to anything. And they bypass digestion. They stay. That's what you want. So all of this ionic minerals, they're insane. It's the exact opposite of what you do want. So you want the right minerals called truly chelated, and then you need a detoxifier. And again, the best one I've seen is called Essiac. I like adding cat's claw to it. It's just a funny name. It's an herb. And there's two ways you can do it. You can just eat the herbs themselves. I didn't believe it would be that good, so I had a digestive simulation run. It was about 93% as good as the water brew. So the typical way is you brew it in water. It's called a decoction. You boil it for 10 minutes. Then you steep it for 12 hours. And after 12 hours, there's nothing more that comes out. You can check tests on it, total dissolved solids. So it needs to be brewed for a solid 12 hours, and you get the water-soluble stuff. And it is phenomenal. Anybody with colon cancer issues, prostate cancer issues, there's nothing along with the oils that touch this. Essiac. It's an herbal product. There's different brands, but you want one that's water distilled. That's the best. That's the most potent. If you don't have a problem, then you can take just the capsules of the herb itself. You're going to be fine. But if you have any kind of a problem, prostate issue, cancer issue, you want, 1% makes a difference. 1% in an athlete makes a difference. So, like I said, I don't get into any brand names because I talked disease prevention. I only got in trouble once before with the state of Texas. You can't do that, even though preventing scurvy with a supplement is a supplement, and it is a disease, but doesn't seem to carry too much weight. So I can talk science all day long, but I don't get into specific formulations. I can tell you what you need to look for in a formulation based on the science. So when I take a few minutes, I really like people understanding science. So before buying products, I tell people, get either the 24-hour diet if you care about weight, or PEO solution if you care about health. Now, they're the same material by and large, but the focus is from a very, very different point. They're both very current. 2014, 2013, science hasn't changed at all. So they're both very, very current. Most physicians read them twice, so don't feel bad if you go, it's too much. That's what I try and do. I typically write for physicians, and I write giving them information they haven't seen anywhere else, because they don't have time to waste. So this is what I tell physicians. I said, I hope I haven't wasted too much of your time, and the answer is always no, you haven't. I don't regurgitate the garbage that's already known or the stuff that's wrong. I just give the medical science, and the cool thing with me is I give you the reference on the page. You don't go to endnotes, you don't go hidden somewhere. I give you the exact quote from the medical textbook or the journal so you can see it yourself. And then if it's complicated, of course, I'll give a translation, but I want you seeing what they said. Most other authors just summarize it. Half the time they mislead you because it's not what they want to say. I don't do that. You can make your own decisions. I'm not going to tell you what to do. If you're over 21, my job is to give the world's best medical science. I'm a theoretist. So until we did the Iowa experiment measuring the arterial flexibility and the blood flow, doctors would always go, can you prove any of this? And I said, well, you're going to have to go into a hospital and, no, I'm a theoretical guy. I said, well, we can't do anything with this. Then when I did the Iowa thing, measuring blood flow with plasmography, which is really cool. It's like a pulse oximeter. You can measure the blood flow. They went nuts because this actually showed taking the PEOs. We had people that weren't taking the oils, and I think it was about 8 years biologically younger after 3.5 months of the oils, arterial-wise. And what you do is you look at different population samples, 20-year-olds, 30, 40, 50, it's easy to do. It's already been done. Now, they didn't do anything with this in America. They do some of it in Europe, but in America they didn't. And the comment was, well, we don't know how to do any of this anyway. I'm not going to declog you. I don't know what to do. Statins don't do it. They just slow the progression of the heart disease, right? That's the other thing. Don't know how to reverse it, and don't know how to make the arterial artery more flexible. Don't really know how to do it. Decrease the blood pressure by decreasing the blood flow. That doesn't make the artery more flexible. That just cuts the blood flow in half. So it's very misleading. And that would scare the heck out of me, cutting your blood flow in half. Remember the oxygen transfer? Well, now you just cut that. Got a problem. Major problems, but nobody seems to really look too far out. So it's a major deal. So these are the three things you want: the oils, the minerals, and the detoxifier. So take a look at the books. Like I said, diet, 24-hour diet, and I did that with an Italian doctor. So you have his viewpoint on things, and then PEO solution is with the raw foods vegan. So you got Dr. Robert Rowan, very, very big name in integrative medicine. He was the editor-in-chief of Second Opinion newsletter for a decade. Very sharp guy, up on the biochemistry. Again, raw foods vegan. So you can see how this can be done either way, as long as you get the oils. But take a look, and then we'll come back in maybe 10, 15 minutes. And then have all the questions after we come back.
I would say how much and what quantity?
Yeah, good question. For the oils, I like prophylactically, meaning you don't have a disease or any condition you're wanting to treat. 1 teaspoon is good for a 160-pound person a day. It's that powerful. So you got 100 trillion cells, that's going to get into that? Yeah. How'd you figure that out? Empirically. I mean, this is all I do for 20 years. Took a long time to figure this out. All over the world, physicians all over the world. And it's gotten to the stage where MD Anderson is taking this real seriously. It's the #1 cancer center in the world, the #1 plastic surgery department in the world, the #1 plastic surgery fellows in the world, looking at my science. So that's pretty good. It's taken a long time, but that's pretty good. So this is state-of-the-art stuff, and you can judge for yourself. But that's how much you need. You don't need a lot. It's very conservative.
How much is MD Anderson using for cancer patients?
We're going to be in the surgery for mastectomy patients. That's where we're starting here. So we'll answer that when you come back. But take 10 or 15 minutes. If you have any questions, I'll answer them as long as I know the answer. And if I don't know the answer based on science, I'll tell you that. Somebody's obligated to say, I don't know. I don't know why people, they won't tell you that. They just make up an answer and give it to you. Well, you asked for an answer, you got it. Yeah, but it's wrong. It doesn't even make sense. I mean, 2 and 2 is 4. You can say it's 6 all you want, but don't accept that. So, a few minutes, come back. Thanks.